All right. Yeah, that was an amazing talk. I did someone sing. Okay, I don't think we see any more questions. We're a little early, but if you want, Sasquatchii, you can kind of take over.
Okay, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Should I just jump right into it?
Yeah, we have like you have an extra 2 minutes, which is cool. Just do whatever.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'll start. Oh, just one more annoying question. Can you see, you can only see the slide, right? There's no
Yes.
control panel. Okay, sweet.
Yep.
All right, awesome. I guess I'll get started. Okay, so hey everybody. Today we're going to talk about UI design and visual novels and how it can be used to take your visual novel to the next level. UI design can help contribute to the atmosphere, reinforce themes within a story, and even draw players into your visual novel. But before we get to that, I just want to take a second to introduce myself. That is a picture of me. My real name is Laura, but online I go by Sasquatchii. I'm a freelance designer and I've worked on the UI for a number of different visual novels. And before we get started, I just want to define what a user interface is. So I'd like to use an analogy to start. And let's just pretend that your visual novel or the game that you've been working on is a toilet. I know this sounds crazy and ridiculous, but hopefully it'll make sense in a minute when I explain. I think that one thing that visual novels and toilets have in common is design. And this is a blueprint design plan for a toilet, in case you are wondering. And with both toilets and visual novels, most people rarely stop to think about how they're designed. We take them for granted, they just work. So, going back to our toilet analogy, if your visual novel is a toilet, then anybody that uses this toilet would represent the players of your visual novel. And everything that they touch and interact with would be considered the user interface. So that would include the toilet lid, the toilet seat, the handle, maybe even the toilet paper. So in a visual novel, everything that the user can click on and interact with is the user interface. Sounds pretty simple, right? You're probably wondering why the heck I chose toilets to use in this analogy. And really, it's just to get everyone thinking about design and how it can affect our experiences and how we use things. So when you guys encounter a toilet like this, it's probably not too different than most of the toilets you're used to using. And I think we'd all know how to use this toilet, and hopefully we wouldn't have any problems doing so. But what about a toilet like this? The first time I ever visited Japan, I got off the airplane and went inside the airport, went to the first bathroom I saw. It's a 14-hour flight. And I came across toilets like these with all these crazy options and buttons on them. And one of the cool features it had was you could actually play music or like chirping cricket noises to mask any embarrassing noises you might make inside of the stall. But I think it took me like 5 minutes to figure out how to flush. Everything was in Japanese, which I don't speak, and I got really confused. Japan also has these, which are squat toilets. And if you're a Westerner like me, you might think that these are really weird at first, which I did. But now I kind of like them because they're actually a lot more hygienic than regular toilets if used correctly. Some toilets have bidets, some are compact, and some are just kind of pretty. Okay, enough about toilets. Hopefully that all made sense and my analogy wasn't too crappy. I think that we can approach visual novels with a similar mindset when we create and design them. We don't have to use a cookie cutter approach. We can design something that is special and unique. And if you pay attention to the UI when you're creating visual novels, it can do a lot for your game. A well designed user interface can contribute to a game's atmosphere, themes, and player immersion. And to start, I'd like to focus on atmosphere. And when I say atmosphere, what I mean is the mood created by a combination of imagery, sound, music, or lack thereof, story, gameplay, and the sense of agency which games are so well known for. And you might be wondering, how exactly can a user interface help create atmosphere? And I have two different examples of UI from different games that do a really good job of that. And one game with an amazing UI is Life is Strange. And in it, you play as an 18-year-old girl named Max, who is an aspiring photographer. And one of the things that struck me the first time I played the game was that it took me back to high school. Like I felt like an 18-year-old girl again, and I was well into my 20s the first time I played. And I think the UI plays a huge part in helping to accomplish that. And in the game, when you play it, you're inside the main character's head a lot. And as you walk around, you'll often get to hear her random thoughts on like what she thinks or how she feels about the things that she encounters. And there's a menu where you can read her journal and new entries appear as the game progresses. And all of her journal entries contain doodles and random illustrations and scraps of paper that she looks like she pasted in there somehow. And they carry this journal scrapbook look and feel throughout each part of the menu. Everything feels handmade and special. And I think that attention to detail makes everything feel more personal and intimate. The textures that they use here really help drive home that, yeah, we're in high school and all the items we're seeing in this menu are all probably things that we had or did at some point in high school. They have like the lined paper, the bottom left and right corners of the screen, and we've got Polaroid pictures, the journal notebook itself, and lots of little ripped up pieces of paper with doodles on them. Actually reminds me of being in school and ripping up pieces of paper from my pages of my notebook and like writing notes to pass to my friends in class. And I also think the ink doodles and the watercolor splashes are really nice touches too, and they make me think of art class. There's also this phone menu you can pull up to talk to other characters, and I love the fact that it looks like an actual cell phone with the dates and the times included for each message, which is a nice touch. I was 16 and in high school when I got my first phone, and I remember texting people a lot. So yeah, that's the Life is Strange UI in a nutshell. Another game that uses its UI to create atmosphere is the Walking Dead series by Telltale Games. And if you didn't know, it is a property of the TV show and the comic books, which were like wildly popular. And if you're not familiar with The Walking Dead, it's basically a story about survivors in a post apocalyptic world with zombies, and every day is a struggle to survive. But one thing I noticed when playing the game was that it took inspiration from both the TV show and the comic books to create a grisly, rough, but also kind of cartoonish look and feel to everything. And this is a series of images to the opening intro of the show. And this is the game's UI. You can kind of start to see how they drew from the aesthetic that was already created. I really like how they faded the elements around the edges here to give it a worn look. It's a really simple thing, but it really helps to kind of create and build this bleak and rough sort of aesthetic. Even here, things just feel dirty and grimy, which is exactly what you'd expect in a post-apocalyptic world where you're constantly fighting zombies. I think they nailed it with the colors, textures, and overall direction that they took the UI here. Those were the only two examples I had for creating atmosphere, but in both of those examples, they utilized color, texture, and paid close attention to detail in order to enhance and elevate the atmosphere within the game. And on top of creating atmosphere, UI design can go hand in hand with contributing to the themes in a game. And probably the greatest example I can think of a UI doing this in a game would have to be Persona 5. So in order to understand why Persona 5's UI is so great at contributing to the themes in the story, I need to explain a little bit about the game to give it some context. But don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything for you guys. But Persona 5 is a Japanese RPG that sort of juxtaposes the mundane, like everyday life with like fantasy. And the player avatar is a Japanese high school student who balances everyday tasks like classes, part-time jobs with battling these fantastic demons based on creatures from world mythology and folklore. And the game's narrative is inspired about stories of rogues, and the protagonists like work together to steal the hearts of their victims. And the themes in the game deal with personal freedom in regards to like society, how society can both be beneficial and harmful to individuals. And like, you know, there's all the time, there's always going to be corruption in society and abuse of power by those in power. And Persona 5 talks a lot about those issues, and you know the response to those issues a lot of the time is public apathy and lack of engagement. And it tells the story of this group of kids who decide to take matters into their own hands. And Persona 5 at its core is really a game about the spirit of rebellion. And I think the UI draws out those themes and helps kind of build upon that rebellious spirit in nature. And you can see they've got like this red, white, black color scheme going on. And the font here looks like ransom notes with random letters cut up from magazines. And it also draws a lot from like the punk rock aesthetic. And if you didn't know, punk is all about individuality and anarchy. And here are some examples from punk fanzines from the 1980s to kind of show you how they've sort of captured that same style and similar energy that these magazines contained. And by being intentional with their design choices and drawing inspiration from other sources, Persona 5's bold and stylish interface reinforces its themes of rebellion, freedom, and individuality. And I think that's only one of the reasons why the Persona 5 UI is awesome. I could go on and on about all the things it does really well, but it'd take me too long, and we don't have that much time. So yeah, one of the other cool things that your UI can do for your game is help immerse players within the game. And what do I mean when I say immersion? Basically, it's a feeling of engrossment within the game. The user starts to feel like they're actually there in the world that the game creates. And one of the most immersive games that I've ever played was the Fallout series, especially Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. And the recent Fallout games are post apocalyptic action role playing games. And in them, players explore rundown worlds, complete various quests, and level up their character. And when I played these for the first time in high school and then later on as an adult, I just really fell in love with the games. I lost hours just exploring, fighting enemies, and making friends and alliances, and kind of learning about what kind of person I'd want to be in a world where everything feels like it's been turned upside down. And I think that the way that the UI in these games are designed really helps draw players into that world. And here's a screenshot of what the UI in the games look like. And I'm not sure how well you guys can see it on the left, but it actually says Pip-Boy. And in the games, PIP, PIP, is an acronym for Personal Information Processor. And in the Fallout universe, Pip-Boys are these devices that are worn on the arm, and they display information on a smallish screen. And Pip-Boys are capable of keeping track of the player's health. They can map out areas that you've explored. They can keep track of your skills and your abilities. And you can even use them to listen to the radio. So I think Pip-Boys are very iconic as part of the Fallout, like even since the first game. And fans of the game really seem to love the Pip-Boy device. And there was even a special edition 3D model that came with the game in 2015, which players could buy for $120. And it was compatible with smartphones, and you could wear it on your arm. And I don't know a ton about it beyond that, but it was actually so popular that Bethesda couldn't make enough units to meet the demand, and they even ended up publicly apologizing for it. But people have also gone so far as to modify the special edition Pip-Boy or create their own versions, which I think is actually kind of awesome. Here are just some fan-made ones. And from a UI perspective, integrating the UI with this kind of device that is worn on the player character is kind of genius. And here's an animation of what it looks like when the player first pulls up the menu in the game. And then in just a second, I hope you guys can see this, it'll show the device returning. But you can see the arm rises up to look at the Pip-Boy, and then it's lowered down again as we return back into the game. And no matter where you are in the game, you'll always be connected to that world within the game and also to your character. You'll always be standing there, right there with your character, looking down at your arm, able to see everything in the background as well, which changes every time depending on where you are and what you're looking at. So compare that to this, which is a lot more static. And this is actually the settings menu from the first Fallout game ever created. And so I think sometimes when you encounter these kinds of menus within games or visual novels, it takes you out of the game's world and reminds you a little bit that, yes, this is just a game. And yeah, here's the menu. And beyond the Pip-Boy menus, the other menus in Fallout are pretty minimal, which is great for helping players feel immersed within the world, because no matter what, like when I was playing, I always felt so connected to everything, even when I was in the menus. And I think that the newer Fallout games do that really seamlessly, and it's wonderful. And yeah, that's basically all I have for the Fallout menus. So just to summarize what Fallout did and how you can apply that to your games, they use clever design to integrate the UI and create a seamless experience between menus and gameplay. And by doing so, they're able to create an immersive experience for players. And yeah, that's it. Hopefully that was helpful and you can take some inspiration or get some cool ideas from some of these examples and implement them into the user interfaces in your own visual novels. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening.
Yay. All right, we have questions coming up here.
Okay.
We have about 12 minutes for questions. So someone asked, what is your favorite video game UI?
Oh gosh, favorite video game UI. Am I? Oh wow. It's probably gotta be Persona 5. Honestly, I don't know. I really love. It's so weird. The first time I saw this UI, it was so jarring that I kind of hated it a little bit. I know that's like sacrilege to say, but like I don't know, like once you get into the game, like it's really well done. I think it's just like it's so different and so awesome. And like the cool thing about it is like they have, Persona 1, Persona 2, Persona 3, Persona 4 that they have like this traditional like structure that they build upon, but then they break the rules a little bit. Yeah, I think I really like it. I think it's great. And does a lot of cool things.
The person has a question. How do you strike a balance between usability, aesthetics, and disability accommodation?
How do you strike a balance between usability, aesthetic, and what was the third thing?
And disability accommodation. So
disability. So
yeah.
like, are we talking about like color blindness or people who cannot maybe see? Is that
high contrast, color blindness, those
yeah.
things.
Yeah, that is, oh wow. that is a whole other presentation. So the question is, they're asking, that's I don't really know off the top of my head. And I think it depends on like, it's like such a hard question to answer because like, I think it really depends on what, I don't know. To be honest, I've actually never really designed a game for like people with disabilities. I know in Ren'Py there are some features that are built in, like the self-voicing, but yeah, I I wish I had an answer. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in. I'm sure other people might have some good ideas.
If you don't mind me weighing in just a second, one of my kids has got CVI, which is cerebral vision impairment, which means she finds it quite hard to engage with anything that's very cluttered. So she'll engage with a lot of content. She'll find it overwhelming if the UI isn't clear enough. And one of the things that I found was that this allowed me to enter into a world of really looking for these accessibility options. And the nice thing with Ren'Py, as a few people have mentioned, is that you can change the size of the font, for example. That can make a really big difference. But other things that maybe currently aren't being considered so much are things like creating greater spacing between elements or allowing people to engage with just one element at a time on screen. So, for example, blacking out or fading out other elements as they hover over the one that they've currently got highlighted. So it really, I suppose it really depends on the type of game that it is, how people are engaging with it, and what kind of accessibility options people want to consider. That's it for me.
Cool. All right. Someone
I was going
asked,
to mention there's a resource somewhere in Dev Talk that I can find later and put in the links that's about doing design, specifically UI. It's more geared towards websites, but I'm sure it can be applied to visual novel UI as well for various different disabilities, color blindness, autism, a few other things like that.
Okay. Oh, someone used the question thing in the webinar interface, but they are asking what's your favorite UI from like a pure VN instead of just any game.
Okay. So this is like so random. What's my favorite UI from VN? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Cyanide Tea. They're like, they make a lot of otome games, and they're they make a lot of like free otome games, but all of their UI is just beautiful, and it like it inspires me a lot. And a lot of the time, if I'm designing a UI for a game, I love looking at their UI. They're really good at creating like the atmosphere within their games, and like creating tones, and like I don't know, their UI is always just like takes into account like their themes and like the world they're trying to build. So yeah, I would go Cyanide Tea. I'll go check them out. Their UI is just gorgeous.
Cool. All right. Someone asked, do you have examples of your own work?
I do. I didn't I felt like it would be like weird to put them in here. I wanted to like show like the best of the best, like ever, like super professionals. And I don't know, I felt kind of weird about putting them in the slide, but yeah, I do. I have on my Twitter, I post like work in progress stuff all the time. If you guys want to connect on Twitter, I will gladly follow VN people. It's just my visual novel work and stuff. So yeah, I'd love to.
Mm-hmm. All right. Someone asked, what tools do you usually use for designing?
Photoshop and Illustrator mostly. Just because that's what I've always used and that's what I'm used to. I try to sketch too, like if it's some sort of menu that is less standard and it's like something weird and different. Like I tell people like sketching is like the greatest thing ever. Just like, even if it's just like a crappy pen and paper sketch, like I'm a big fan of that. Even if it looks ugly, like just putting the ideas out there and trying to get the layout and like the composition is really helpful as well.
Oh my God, there's like all these questions and I can't even. Okay, going through the list. Would you suggest in UI and visual novels trend more toward diegetic approach, which is like Fallout or Near, or a meta approach to maximize the sense of immersion? Or do you think the choice of diegetic or meta UI is a case-by-case basis? That's a loaded question, dude.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it should be a case-by-case basis, and those decisions should absolutely be made by the people who are developing their games. This really, I think this presentation was not to say to you guys like, oh, you have to do all of these things or like pick one of these things. It's just really to give you guys ideas and inspiration. But I think in the end, like the people creating their games like should like think about like what's most important to you when you're working on your UI. And like I think that there's no right or wrong. That's the best and the worst thing about the design is there is no black and white right or wrong. It's just really like if you think about why are we doing this and why are we making these design decisions. I can't really answer that for anybody. But yeah, I think it should totally on a case-by-case basis.
There's so many questions and not enough time. Do you want to scroll up a little bit and see like all the little question marks? Do you want to pick out a few that you like?
Okay, this is in Discord, right?
Yeah, in the Discord. Meanwhile, Tim, I'm going to hand you presenter so you can kind of set up. You have about 4 minutes. That way we have smooth transition.
Got it.
Cool. So many questions. There's like one word. It's like, what do you recommend for someone starting to learn UI design?
I mean, just look at what other games, play other games, look at other games for inspiration, try to get a feel for what you like. And also like you can look outside of UI design as well. Like you can look at all sorts of different medium and music to get inspired, kind of like how the example of like picking on Persona 5, like they drew from like punk rock and like, they had those crazy letters and color schemes. But yeah, someone learning UI, there's a lot of like tutorials, free tutorials online as well, like a lot of YouTube videos and like, I don't know, I learned a lot just from playing around and just trying new things like for the heck of it. So yeah, there's all sorts of cool ways you can learn. There's a lot of blogs like step by step, like here's a screenshot of what you can do, and then like, you know, like, hey, if you want to make this thing, just do this. And yeah, I've done those as well. It really just depends on how you like to learn.
Yeah, we need a usability and usability testing talk.
For like
Some
visual
people
novels.
are asking like, how do you where do you draw the line? How do you not overwhelm the users and stuff? And I'm like, the answer is like, you got to test it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if it's just like having your like mom or like some friends like sit down and play it. Like I didn't do that with one of the first games I made. I mean, it was just like, it was nothing. It was just like a little experiment. But like the first game I ever made, I actually like stripped out all of the UI, and it was just like text on the screen. And then like later on, like some people made some Let's Plays, and a lot of people didn't realize there were menus. Like they didn't realize they could save their games because there were no buttons, and they were just like, so yeah, I should have, yeah, playtesting is a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. But yeah.
We need to get someone to talk about that next year. So free proposal idea.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay. We have 2 minutes, so we can probably field one more question. Did you see anything that you liked?
I saw one. It says, let's see, there were a bunch. Let's see. Oh man. I saw one that says like, it was by Periphery. What are the questions that you wish your clients ask you more when you help them design their UI? It's not really like a question. I really like to ask them questions to kind of, I mean, it's a collaboration, right? So when you're working together with the designer, an artist, a voice actor, a programmer, it's really more of a collaborative effort. So I think that like, just, like they'll ask me questions like, hey, what do you think of this? And I'll usually turn around and ask them like even more questions, especially when I'm like first starting to work with them. And like, just communication is great. We talk a lot about like when, especially for UI specifically, like people will come to me. Some people like have a specific vision, and then some people are just like, I have no idea. Sorry, we're going to say something?
Yeah, it's time. So we can continue this in the chat while Tim, you're
Absolutely.
up. All right. Thank you.
All right.